But the president was talking about, he was announcing this immigration initiative that was undertaken by one of his cabinet members, and he was interrupted, some say heckled, by a reporter. Take a look.
It is the right thing to do. Excuse me, sir. It's not time for questions, sir. Not while I'm speaking. And the answer to your question, sir, and the next time I'd prefer you let me finish my statements before you ask that question, is this is the right thing to do for the American people. Baby, I didn't ask for an argument. I'm answering your question. It is the right thing to do for the American people, and here's why. Here's the reason. Because these young people are going to make extraordinary contributions and are already making contributions to our society.
A remarkable exchange for a whole bunch of reasons, and I think particularly in the context of watching this exchange in a society in which it does seem like all our deference or belief in authority is breaking down all over the place. And this is, you know, conservatives, part of being a conservative is deference to authority, and obviously there was no such deference there. Dave, what did you make of this exchange? You're a political reporter. You're at the White House sometime. You know some of the folks at the Daily Caller, which is the publication at which the reporter Neil Monroe worked. What did you think of it?
I was not surprised at all, and I kind of predicted the response that they would come up with. I was not predicting the clawback they did, which was that Neil Monroe mistimed his question. Right. I've done that before. I've mistimed things 5 times in a row too. It's horrible. But no, the Daily Caller was explicitly created, and Tucker Carlson, the editor, has made this argument to challenge the media's lapdog nature in this coverage of Barack Obama. The essential argument of the Daily Caller and a lot of conservative media, the Free Beacon, the Weekly Standard to an extent, is that the media as we know it is explicitly liberal. It's always biased. We need to correct it. And journalism in this mold is about correcting bias. Is it about finding truth? First, you need to correct the bias. So I wasn't surprised that the first response, I think, when they tweeted was he did his job. We're very proud. Monroe actually, even though he said he came to the response later, was he's telling reporters at the White House. I should say I wasn't there. I just was talking to people who were there. I was doing my I was asking a question because you wouldn't ask the question, and I would.
And we should say the question was this incredibly hackish propagandistic question about why are you screwing over the American people.
Foreigners, especially.
Foreigners over American people. We should also note that he had his hands in his pockets when he was doing this, which, as being a reporter, Jamila, you're a reporter, Dave, generally when you're asking a question as a reporter, you're going to have some writing implement out, or you're going to have a tape recorder out, because the point is that they are going to answer the question, and you're going to take some notes on it. And it was interesting to see the response to this yesterday online, because I think, people feel that this president is disrespected in a way that other previous presidents haven't. And obviously I think there's a racial subtext in terms of people's perception of that being the case, whether or not it is the case. There's the famous Joe Wilson moment, which again was another norm that was violated, right? That's something that just isn't done. You don't yell out at the president during the State of the Union, but Joe Wilson did. Amy, I'm curious how you saw this, because you are someone who is famously not deferential to authority. You are someone who is famously a dogged reporter who doesn't sit around and wait for leaders to tell you when you can ask questions. I'm curious what you made of it.
You know, if only reporters had actively, aggressively questioned President Bush when he was alleging weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. These are not just academic questions or, bipartisan Democratic, Republican repartee. Yeah, that was a matter of lies that took lives, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of lives. I think the press is clearly, whether it's a Republican or a Democratic president, on bended knee. And I think it's critical to stop having these sort of unstated agreements on how the press should operate. On the other hand,
I was just about to be like, so you're pro-heckling.
No, I am not pro-heckling at all, but I'm very serious about asking serious questions. And the kind of consensus in the press, I remember during Clinton's years being in the White House press corps and asking about his sales of weapons to Indonesia, which was killing the people of East Timor, not to mention the people of Indonesia itself. And it was the reporters, the peer pressure of the reporters. I didn't respond to it, but they would always say, oh, please. They would be asking about where he got his golf clubs from. Right. It is absolutely critical that there not be this unspoken agreement between the press and the president, that they're there to ask serious questions and they're not there to be on bended knee.
Let me two responses to my own personal take on this. I mean, first of all, serious question being key, right? This was not a serious question. In no means was it a serious question.
It wasn't eliciting a good answer.
Well, it was not going to elicit a good answer. And the other thing is, there's just a basic. I totally agree, right? But there's form and content, right, of the question, and there's a certain level of just basic decorum, which isn't necessarily like a lapdog consensus. It's just that, for instance, I didn't just like bark out something to you while you were speaking just now, because we have a certain sense of decorum about how you comport yourself.
But you could say that the decorum of American press, even the decorum, is too lapdogish, right? I mean, I don't support this heckling. This was ridiculous in 1,000 ways. But you compare the BBC's way of interviewing
a lot of people
a politician, or the Irish Times interview of the president, President Bush, which was quite aggressive, but I think respectful. It was like, I just want you to answer the question. You're not going to answer the question, then I'm going to come back and ask it again. That's good. We need more of that.
Yeah, I've seen Jeremy Paxman ask the question 8 times in a row. Okay, Tony Blair, I'll ask you again. I'll ask you again.
Theater,
we don't do that.
And there also is a very clear racial subtext about this. But when it comes to, I mean, speaking to European journalists, they always comment on how, I mean, they've got the royalty, they've got the kings and queens, but they say we treat our president as royalty.
And one of the things to get deeper here is when I want to talk about that Irish Times interview, because that was seen through a very strictly partisan lens. The same people defending the Daily Caller were, of course, criticized does not begin to tell you the kind of firestorm that it would provoke if the positions were reversed. And the other thing is to think about, in an environment of very low trust, right? What does the presidential campaign look like, and what does the press's relationship with the president look like when neither are very trusted by the American public? Let's talk about that after this break.